Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Well, friends, it's one of those shows where Tony's worried again, and we have to spend all sorts of time talking him off the ledge. So join me, won't you, for Tony Worries About Stuff, episode The Wide Receivers. Go ahead, Tony. What's going to fall apart this year?
You're putting words into my mouth about falling apart, but since you said it, I think one area that could cause the Ohio State football team to fall apart, Tom, is a lack of explosion in the slot, right? We've seen Ohio State slot receiver last year, Brandon Inniss, averaged 7.5 yards per catch, a long reception of just 29 yards. And then they brought in Kyle Parker from LSU to help that out, or help the position out, or help the entire room out. The problem is Kyle Parker himself averaged 10.6 yards per catch on his 31 catches, and his long catch was just 43 yards. I don't know that he had anything. I was trying to find out on CFB stats how many, like 30-yard receptions or whatever. He doesn't show up because there's not enough. Right, this may have been his only catch over 30 yards. And the fact that now you've paired Brandon Inniss and Kyle Parker, two guys who combined for 67 receptions last year for 601 yards, and maybe only one 30-yard reception between the two of them. I think that is a concern. We know Des Jones may be more explosive, but he's in back of the line right now. You could throw Phillip Bell in there. We don't know how explosive he is. Frankly, that's not ever been part of his game. So just overall, I think there is a concern here when Ryan Day wants an explosive offense, and we saw some of that lacking last year. I don't know that they can get it from this position, even though there were at times we saw Brandon Inniss breaking free, but Julian Sayin didn't see him. I don't know that this is a position where there's going to be a bunch of big hits.
Yeah, I think you're talking specifically about the H position there, because I feel like as soon as you said that, I thought, well, we'll have to talk about Deon McHuan, but that's really, that's a Z, so that's sort of replacing Cardell Tate. So yeah, I think that's a fair concern. I think that's a reasonable concern. I think you haven't seen it from Brandon Inniss. Like, we've seen enough of Brandon Inniss that it feels like you've probably seen a lot of what Brandon Inniss has to offer to the team. And he is a really solid, very reliable player, but he's not an explosive player. And so, Kyle Parker, I have not watched enough Kyle Parker to have a strong opinion on him, but the stats are, the stats are the stats, and the stats say that's not really what he does either. You can certainly see them putting, if Chris Henry is more ready than we were sort of discussing him as on one of our recent shows, then maybe Jeremiah Smith is in the slot sometimes, and Jeremiah Smith is his own kind of explosive. So maybe that's part of the solution there. But yeah, I do think that's a legitimate concern. And I think on a broader sort of perspective, I think the lack of potential explosiveness in a couple spots on the Ohio State team, including the running backs, don't have necessarily a Travion Henderson type home run hitter there. And your slot doesn't have a Jackson Smith and Jigba type who could hit, big plays downfield. And there's a couple spots where you don't necessarily have that club in your bag the way you necessarily would want to. Doesn't mean it can't happen at all, but just means it probably won't happen as regularly as you might want it to.
You mentioned Deon McHuan, which takes me to my second concern, and that is the step up from UTSA to Ohio State is too much for him. Too much for him to expect him to be a 50-catch, 800-yard guy, or, close to what he was last year with UTSA as a junior, which was 65 catches, 726 yards, 8 touchdowns. You do that, and you're essentially doing, you're picking up the slack from Carnell Tate very, very well. That's a lot to ask of McHuan, who has played at a lower level and played well for 3 years in terms of the explosions, the explosive plays. I think he had 5 catches of 30 yards or more last year, which is middle of the pack in the AAC or the American Conference now. So I just wonder if the step up is too much for him. But Tom, I will tell you, despite that, he has played in more ranked regular season games the past 2 years than Ohio State has, and twice as many as Indiana.
Which is kind of crazy when you think about it. I mean, he's playing in the American, which is a pretty good non-power conference, but it's a non-power conference. And, he's played the competition they've played has not been terrible. I was just sanity checking myself because that's one of those schools where I'm like, all right, this is not the Texas school that's in CUSA, right? This is the Texas school that is the American. I know this, and I just was sanity checking myself. Tony, Sacramento State's in the MAC. You have to kind of sanity check yourself sometimes. And even sanity is not always correct these days. But, he's been playing at a reasonable level, kind of an intermediate, mid-tier kind of level of football. So this is not an enormous jump. This is not someone jumping. This is not last year where Logan George was jumping from Idaho State to Ohio State. And it was like, that's like 4 levels of football. That's a lot. This is a little bit more reasonable. And I think the fact that he's done it for a couple of years, he's been around. This is not a guy who had one good year. He's been around enough that I think this is less of a concern for me. I think you've seen enough guys make that kind of a jump from sort of that, high group of 6 level to a power conference, a high power conference team. I mean, Indiana, just a huge chunk of Indiana's team last year was based on the ability to do that. So, yeah, I think that's less of a concern to me than it might have been a couple of years ago when you really hadn't seen that. This feels like one of those things where, yes, you want to see him do it on this level. And I'm a little reticent to say, oh, yeah, he's absolutely going to match exactly his stats at UTSA 100%. He may. He's certainly not going to be the top concern for opposing defenses the way he probably was at UTSA. And he's certainly going to have a better quarterback than he had at UTSA. And all that's going to sort of help, going to work in his favor. But it's a jump. But if he can do 80% of that this year, that would be, I think, be a reasonable expectation and probably an okay outcome for Ohio State.
And I do quickly want to correct myself. He did not play in one of the games against the ranked opponents last year. In 2024, that was Memphis. So he has played in as many games against ranked opponents as Ohio State in the regular season the past 2 years. My apologies. But in those ranked games last year, 6 catches for 33 yards against Texas A&M, 4 for 23 against North Texas, but then did respond against Tulane with the 8 for 96 for 2 touchdowns. So he's got that, he'll have more help around him. So I don't think you can judge just what he did in those games.
And to just sort of further my point, I wanted to pull up the stats to provide a little more context around this. When I say he's done this and he didn't just do this 1 year, 3 years in a row, he's had at least 40 catches. He had 42 catches for 546 yards, then 45 catches for 424 yards, then 65 catches for 726 yards. So he is about as proven a commodity as you're going to get at this point. 152 career catches, 696 yards, 16 touchdowns over 3 years. This is not incredible, earth-shattering stats, but he's also someone where at this point you kind of know what he's going to be. And I don't think this is going to be someone who moves up and it's just like, oh no, this is way too much for him. I think he's going to be probably fine.
My third concern, Tom, is that Jeremiah Smith in his first 2 years at Ohio State got to play around and next to first-round draft picks in 2024 as a freshman. He's got Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate next to him. Last year, it was Carnell Tate, and you can throw Max Clare in there. We'll see where he gets drafted. This year, he doesn't have that protection. And not that you need first-round picks around you. You just need guys that are dangerous. But they need to be dangerous enough that the entire defensive focus isn't on shutting down Jeremiah Smith and just living with the results of, well, we'll just let Kyle Parker beat us. We'll just let Deon McHuan beat us, which I think that is the smart way to go. So there's going to have to be something there where it's not just Jeremiah Smith. And those guys need to be viable enough that if you are going to do what you need to do to Jeremiah Smith and try to limit him to 4 catches for 25 yards, whoever else is on the field is making plays and making the defense pay for that so that they maybe have to rethink what they're doing. And the best way to go for Ohio State is that you can't skew so much of your defense towards Jeremiah Smith. But when you look at the roster they have at receiver right now, that's where the gravity is going to go. It's going to go to Jeremiah Smith, and it's going to be up to the other guys to make a defense pay or get them out of it. And right now, I don't know that there's a reason to say, oh, yeah, I'm sure Jeremiah Smith is going to be fine. He's going to be just fine on there's enough help for him, or you know what, he'll just be fine on his own, because I don't think that's the case either.
Yeah, and I think this is a reasonable concern. I was just pulling up Carnell Tate's stats and Jeremiah Smith's stats to remember which games Carnell Tate missed, because it felt like there was about a month where it was just constant drama. And there was only really one game where Jeremiah Smith was fully healthy for the whole game and Carnell Tate was out. And that was against Purdue, which is obviously not a tremendous measuring stick. But in that one, he had actually his highest number of receptions all season, which was 10 catches, 137 yards, and a touchdown. And then the following week, it was 4 for 40 against UCLA, but he got hurt and then was back against Michigan and 3 for 40 and had the touchdown, and Tate was back for that one as well. Yes, I think this is a legitimate concern. I don't know how much of a concern to really say that it is, because again, you saw him without Carnell Tate and he was fine in the one full game you saw him without Carnell Tate, but it was Purdue. So how much does that mean against better competition? How much better is the running game going to be this year? How much better is, I think there's a lot of different factors that you could say go into this. Like, I think this is going to be a better offensive line, which means it's probably going to be a better running game, which means Julian Sayin is probably going to have more time. So how much is that going to help in terms of, helping make it a more balanced offense? And, how is Arthur Smith as the new play caller going to help with the offensive run game and the play, all that kind of stuff. There's just so many different factors that go into this. And I don't know exactly how much to view this as, yeah, this is a big concern, because on the surface, yeah, it absolutely is. And it makes a ton of sense, but it feels like there's a lot of other little stuff. It's like you take Carnell Tate away and you don't have a Carnell Tate caliber receiver. Yes, 100% stipulated. I think that makes this a legitimate concern. I do think they're going to be better in a lot of other places. They don't have a Max Clair, to your point. They don't have a Carnell Tate, to your point. But they're going to be probably better in terms. Bo Jackson should be better this year. Isaiah West should be better this year. We'll see what they get out of Jacoby Jackson this year. The offensive line should be better this year. Julian Sayin should be better this year. Jeremiah Smith himself should be better this year. How much can a Chris Henry help take the pressure off? We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of possibility there. And the odds are, in my mind, some of those things will do enough to make up for at least a good amount of the Carnell Tate loss and the Max Clair loss. That, I don't think you're going to see his stats plummet or anything, but I also don't expect his stats to be meaningfully better than they were kind of on a per game basis, because they dropped off a little bit last year in terms of his just total overall, his total overall stats. His yardage dropped a little bit, but he played 3 fewer games. So they ended up with more receptions last year in 13 games than he did in 16 games as a freshman. So 3 fewer touchdowns, yards per catch were down about 3 yards per catch. So, the numbers were down a little bit, but not, they were not substantially better, but they weren't really substantially worse anywhere other than the yards per catch. I think you're going to probably see at least similar numbers from him this year. I don't think they're going to take a big step backwards.
Hearing lots of shoulds and probablys, Tom. That's a concern.
Tony, it's February, so.
Fourth concern, shoulds and probablys are an abundance of the words being used about the Ohio State Buckeyes right now. Look out. So there you go. Just some concerns that I have at the Ohio State wide receiver position. You may have other concerns. If you do, go ahead and throw them in the comments. We appreciate that. Along with your thumbs up and your subscribing to the channel and all of that. And if you're listening, a 5-star reviews just as rewarding. And of course, you can continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.